For centuries, movies have been a powerful tool in spreading awareness of the reality of society and inspiring change. Even though most are fictional stories and characters, they tend to give us insight into the issues in our community. And no matter how hard we try to hide it, we cannot deny that the world we live in today is still flooded by racism. So let's dive into 5 movies that have approached racism in Black community. The first movie on our list is The Best of Enemies. The Best of Enemies is a cinematic masterpiece that tells the incredible story of Ann Atwater and C.P. Ellis, 2 individuals who could not be more different. Ann is a Black woman activist, while C.P. is a white Ku Klux Klan member. However, they find themselves intertwined in an unlikely friendship during the turbulent 1970s in Durham, North Carolina. The movie portrays the deep-rooted racism in the town during that time, where white people were not allowed to live in the same neighborhoods as Black people. The Black kids were not allowed to attend the same schools as the white kids, and Black people were not even allowed to sit on the same side with white people at the council house. Using CP's character, who is deeply racist, we also learn about the systemic racism that existed in the town at the time. Here, when CP learns that his son might have to attend school with Black kids because of a fire, he is troubled.
Not gonna have them kids going to Tim's school.
Well, they gonna put them somewhere.
Ain't gonna be in Durham Elementary. Tim have enough trouble with that, more distractions.
He tells his wife that he might have to consider sending his son to a private school where he won't have to go to school with Black kids. His wife, who seems to be against his racism, counters him by saying that he would need sufficient money to afford a private school.
May have to look into one of them private schools outside of town.
Oh, yeah. How are we gonna pay for that?
I'm working on it.
Ain't nothing gonna work until you start selling gas to the other half of Durham.
In another scene, CP refuses to sit at the same table as Ann and Bill because they are Black.
I ain't waiting for that cracker. I'm on.
Mr. Ellis, please come sit down.
When Bill asks him to co-chair the charrette alongside Ann, he hesitates and says,
I'm gonna think about it, you know? Because I wouldn't want your type taking over this, what you call it? Charade.
Fast forward to this scene where the integration meeting is held. The tension in the air is visible as the representatives from both sides of the table gather, with one noticeable difference. The white representatives are seated on one side, while the Black representatives are on the other side. One of the white representatives speak up, expressing his objection to the idea of his daughter being seated next to a Black boy in class.
I don't want my daughter sitting next to a Negro boy in class. I don't want her eating next to one, and I don't want her being at a school dance with one.
As the meeting continues, things take a turn for the worse when CP begins to mock the Black representatives. He asks the Black representative if he is suggesting that there is no difference between Black and white people.
There's no difference between Blacks and whites, right? Because we all worry about our kids. We're all the same, right?
The Black representative responds with an emotionally charged speech,
No, CP, we're not.
explaining the anguish that Black children feel when faced with racism from white children.
Our kids get spit on. Our kids have to move on the sidewalk to let white folks pass. Our kids aren't allowed to sit where they want, play where they want, go to school where they want.
The movie progresses to show how Bill's leadership in the school integration gradually bridges the racial divide. We see heartwarming scenes of Black and white representatives sitting together for lunch, singing and laughing together during their meeting. As the story unfolds, we see Ann stepping up to help CP with his son, Larry. This allows CP to see the Black community in a different light, and he begins to realize that his preconceived notions about them might just be baseless. Though he initially gets angry at Ann for her kind gesture, his wife pays an appreciative visit to Ann. Through these scenes, Osha Gray Davidson approaches the importance of dialogue, understanding, and leadership in tackling racism. But apart from these approaches, the movie also sheds light on how far these racists are willing to go to spread their hateful agenda. Here, we can see that despite the efforts of the integrationists, the Ku Klux Klan members remain steadfast in their determination to sow division and promote racism, as Floyd and the white councilman plot against Trombley, a white man who has a Black manager and ally, Emmett, hoping to intimidate him into voting against the school integration. They go as far as sending officials to inspect his shop, claiming it was inadequately built and asking him to shut it down until he fixes it.
Like I said, if you fix things, you'll be open again in no time.
But the movie eventually takes a positive turn, showcasing a positive change in the racist nature of CP. In a speech, he expresses his newfound acceptance of Black people.
I teach people to hate Black folk.
are supposed to be inferior to us. Now, if I don't believe that, then I have no business being president of the Klan.
And votes yes for the school integration. Another movie that approached the issue of racism head-on is A Jazzman Blues. This movie depicts racism on a whole different level.
What is wrong with the Negroes down here?
Showing how deeply intense and extreme racism in the Black community has been. But this movie is the reality of the Black Americans in the past 100 decades. Pure hatred and discrimination for the color of their skin. A Jazzman Blues is a fascinating tale of the forbidden love between a Black man, Bayou, and his childhood lover, Leanne, who, although Black, pretends to be a white woman and eventually marries a white man, leading Bayou down the road of death. And among the several themes Tyler Perry aimed to explore, one is racism. Set in rural Georgia in 1940, the lines between the white and Black communities were rigidly drawn, with the two communities having their own sides of town and hardly ever crossing over. The movie begins with a TV interview of a white politician who claims not to be a racist, yet cannot help but spew hateful, racist remarks.
I'm not a racist. I just don't believe that this is fair. He got here because of affirmative action, and if I'm elected to Congress, it'll be at the top of my agenda to do away with it.
The story delves into Black racism when Bayou's mother sends him to deliver laundry to Sitsi, her friend, and a maid for a white man, Sheriff Jackson. As Bayou sits down at the dining table, Sheriff Jackson walks in and scolds him for sitting at the table.
Get up from there. We don't allow color to sit at the table.
Well, I'm sorry, Chef Jackson. He brung the wash and I made him sit.
Get up and get out of here.
But it doesn't end there. Just as Bayou is about to leave, he overhears the sheriff introducing his brother and his new wife, Leanne, to Sitsi.
This is my brother John and his beautiful wife.
Leanne.
The movie then takes a darker turn when Leanne's mother, a Black woman, tries to pass off as white and plots to throw Bayou under the bus, setting off a series of events that expose the fear, betrayal, and trauma surrounding racism. She falsely accuses Bayou of whistling at Leanne, the soon-to-be mayor's wife, and a white woman.
Somebody said that he whistled at your wife when he was here today.
That's not true. Sitsi and I were the only ones here. Who could have said that?
I did. I saw him.
This false accusation sets off a chain of events that sees the sheriff and his men hunting Bayou down for supposedly dishonoring a white man's wife.
Where is he, Hattie Mae?
Where's who?
Don't you play with me, your boy.
Oh, they ain't here. What you want with them?
As the plot thickens, we see Bayou running off to the Capitol Royale with his brother and later becoming a famous musician. He, however, returned to Georgia to see Leanne and his son. Unfortunately, in the end, the sheriff and his men get wind of his presence, and in a tragic turn of events, Bayou is lynched and hung to death. Moving on to the third movie on our list, we have The Help. The Help is a captivating story that approaches racism by depicting the experiences of Black maids working in white Southern homes in the early 1960s Mississippi. However, a glimmer of hope shines through when the Black maids finally find their voices after Miss Eugenia, one of the white children taken care of by one of the Black maids, decides to write about their story. The movie tends to approach racism by depicting the segregation of public facilities faced by Black people and the limited career opportunities available to these Black women. In this scene, where a group of white ladies gathers at Elizabeth Leafold's house, Minnie, one of the Black maids, confides in Aibileen in the kitchen about how her boss marks the toilet paper so she would know if Minnie is using their toilet, introducing us to the idea that Minnie's boss, Hilly, is deeply racist.
She going to putting pencil marks on the toilet paper. Did she? Mm-hmm. But I carry paper in from my own damn house. That fool don't know.
In another scene, Hilly, Minnie's boss, looks uncomfortable and needs a bathroom break. However, she refuses to use the guest bathroom, and we later discover from her non-racist mother that this is because Aibileen uses it. Although Aibileen is deeply offended by this revelation, she says nothing and instead goes to check on Elizabeth's baby, Mae Mobley, as instructed. As Aibileen steps away, Elizabeth asks Hilly to use their personal bathroom, but Hilly adamantly refuses.
Just use mine and Roy's. If Aibileen uses the guest bath, I'm sure she uses yours too.
Miss Eugenia tries to change the topic, but the other white ladies at the gathering continue the discussion, expressing their belief that Black help shouldn't be allowed to use their toilets. They argue that it's a matter of hygiene, since the Black maids might be carrying diseases. Hilly, the most racist of them all, proudly announces her bill draft, the Home Health Sanitation Initiative, which provides a separate toilet for Black maids in their white employees' homes. Later, we learn that Elizabeth is also racist, and she makes a separate bathroom for Aibileen and warns her daughter, Mae Mobley, to stay away from it. If you look closely, you will notice that the only occupation shown in this movie for black women is being a maid. They are limited in choice and seen only as good enough to be a help. After Minnie, one of the black maids, loses her job after attempting to use Hilly's bathroom during a rainstorm. She goes back to revenge.
What do you put in here that makes it taste so good?
Eat my shit. Because you just did.
Did what?
But eventually, she gets another job and goes on to work as a maid for Celia Forte, Hilly's enemy. Next on the list is Selma. Selma is a historically compelling drama that passes a powerful message about the suppression and racial discrimination against black people in 1965 by telling the story of Martin Luther King's Selma to Montgomery March for voting rights. Directed by Ava DuVernay in 2014, the movie approaches racism by depicting the systemic barriers that the black Americans faced during the 1960s, showing how they were denied their civil rights of voting through discriminatory laws, intimidation, and violence. Here, a black woman named Annie Lee Cooper goes to the council house to register for her voting card. At first, she appears hesitant to speak to a white secretary, and rightfully so, as she knows it won't come without trouble. Eventually, she hands over her form to him, but the secretary threatens to tell his boss.
You work for Mr. Dunn down at the rest home, ain't that right? Yes, sir. Wonder what old Dunn will say when I tell him one of his gals down here stirring a fuss.
Annie insists that she only wants to exercise her voting rights and that her form is correctly filled out. However, the secretary dismisses her claims, telling her that
it's right when I say it's right.
And asks her hard, ambiguous questions, ultimately denying her the right to register to vote. Another scene shows Martin Luther King Jr. speaking with the president, a white man, about the denial of voting rights that black Americans face.
Well, Mr. President, I'm here to speak specifically about the denial of a basic American right for the Negro citizen, the right to vote.
He explains that in the South, black voters are kept off the rolls and out of the voting booths through systemic intimidation and fear. He asks the president to provide robust enforcement of a federal legislation granting blacks the right to vote.
Now, you asked how you can help. We want federal legislation granting Negroes the right to vote unencumbered.
The president seems hesitant about Martin's request, and he tells him that the South is still yet to stop segregation, making it difficult to grant his request without starting a war. Instead, he offers Martin the chance to bring about a change in eradicating poverty, and asks that the change on voting rights be pushed to a later time.
Well, that's fine, but most of the South is still not desegregating. Let's not start another battle when we haven't even won the first.
Martin argues that this issue cannot wait, citing the several racially motivated murders in the South, including the murder of 4 young girls, whose perpetrators have been freed by white jurors.
Because they are protected by white officials, chosen by an all-white electorate, and on the rare occasions that they face trial, they are freed by all-white juries.
Martin explains that a black person can only become a jurist if they are registered to vote. The president, however, insists that his administration would have to set this issue aside for a while.
Well, Dr. King, you've certainly given me something to think about, but this administration is going to set this aside for a while.
Next, we see Martin Luther King Jr. and his followers going to Selma, where he sets up a nonviolent march with the blacks from Selma to Montgomery, demanding change and challenging the voting status quo, and the rest is history. Next, we have Hidden Figures. Produced in 2017, the movie Hidden Figures is an inspiring story of 3 black women, Dorothy, Mary, and Catherine, in the year 1961, who made significant contributions to American aviation and space technology, despite facing discrimination based on both race and gender. Through the lens of director Theodore Melfi, we see these women's racial struggles as they work at Langley Aeronautical Laboratory in Hampton, Virginia, as human computers, performing complex calculations under the direction of engineers in an all-black unit separate from their white colleagues. But that's not all. Apart from occupational segregation, the black people were also not allowed to use the same facilities as them, or even share a toilet with them. Here, the 3 women were stranded by the roadside with a broken down car. When a white police officer approaches them, they are understandably wary, given the rampant racism of the time. But one of the ladies, Dorothy, tries to calm them down by saying that having a broken car isn't a crime.
No crime in a broken down car.
No crime being Negro, neither.
We later learn that when they reveal that they work at NASA to the police officer, he is taken aback, saying, "Now that's something. I had no idea they hired." And you can tell from his expression that he was about to say, "black people."
NASA? That's something. I had no idea they hired.
Now let's take a look at this scene, showing the clear racial divide between the whites and the blacks. The whites are allowed to work in the main engineering department at Langley, while the black women work as human computers in a smaller office labeled colored computers. But one of the most heartbreaking scenes in this movie is when a white man dumps a waste bin on Catherine, mistaking her for a cleaner as she enters the space group building for the mathematician job.
This wasn't emptied last night.
I'm sorry, I'm not the custodian.
And throughout the movie, we see racism play out, with the black people having their own bathroom, being underpaid, and not being allowed to contribute in meetings like the whites. But in the end, it takes a positive turn for these black women as they eventually overcome the societal barriers, joining engineering teams and serving alongside white men on the Mercury and Apollo space programs. From these cinematic works, we can see how movies have dared to take on the daunting task of presenting the harsh realities that the black community is facing due to the color of their skin. As viewers, we have seen the struggles, the pain, and the oppression that the black community has had to endure. We have watched as characters have been subjected to discrimination, hatred, and violence because of their race. Sadly, the issue of racism persists in our society today, even though it may not be as overt as it once was. The fact remains that there are still individuals who hold on to racist beliefs and perpetuate discrimination against the black community. It is a heartbreaking reality that cannot be ignored. However, we must commend the efforts of these movies that have taken on the issue of racism. They have shed light on the ugly truth that has been buried beneath the surface for far too long.